What is up, wild ones? We are back. We are better than ever. We got a new lens, so everything's looking even better than before. And we've got a great new video for you. Every woodworker has to build their own workbench. It's basically a rite of passage, I think. So that's what we're doing today on Wild Rose DIY.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, as per usual, is start cutting everything down at the chop saw. So basically what I'm going to do is make two identical frames for a top and bottom. I'm basically just going to frame these up the exact same way you do a wall. We're going to do a top and bottom plate and 16 inches on center. So obviously your measurements are going to work out to whatever you need for your shop. For mine, I did my long pieces at 51 inches and then I did the inside pieces at 30.5 inches. The reason I cut mine at 51 inches was to make up for the two end pieces I was going to have that are both 1.5 inches wide. So that means on the inside I'll have a nice even 48 inches or 4 feet. Once I got all my pieces cut out for the top and bottom, I also cut out leg pieces. I just took two 2x4s, just put them together in an L shape like this with a little bit of Gorilla wood glue and then screwed them in. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here, we're not trying to get anything fancy, just gotta build a workbench, you know? So after I got those together, then I could start putting my top and bottom pieces together. So they're basically gonna be the exact same dimensions, but as you'll see, I'm actually gonna rip 1/2 inch off the inside stringers. That way I can take a piece of plywood and set it inside and it'll look nice and framed. Oops. Sometimes it's a good idea to drill a pilot hole first, but we're just going for it. So next I just marked out where my studs were going to go, and just like a standard wall, they're going to go every 16 inches. Make sure you get them nice and square when you put them in. The Husky table has definitely been great for me so far, but I definitely need more workspace, which is why we're building the workbench. So now that we've got our bottom one framed up, I'm going to go ahead and rip down the stringers for the top part. Like I said, I'm just going to take the width of a piece of plywood off, so that way the plywood will sit inside. When you're using a table saw, Mr. Kirk always told me to stand as far off to the side as you possibly can, because if that saw blade catches that wood, it'll shoot it back way faster than you can possibly move. Trust me, you do not want to take a 2x4 to the gut. So as you can see here, they're just a little bit shorter. So now that I got my tabletop put together and I've got the bottom put together, we can go ahead and start putting the legs on. This is nothing fancy, it's just a little bit of glue and screw. So I'm going to start by attaching these to the bottom of our workbench. Nothing fancy, just glue and screw it and make sure that it's nice and straight. Okay, so now that we've got all 4 sets of legs on, we're going to put the top on. So the easiest way I found was just to put this on its side, throw a bunch of glue on, and then we could lift the legs into where they're going to go. Now my plan with these legs was just to leave a little bit of room at the top. So I'm actually just going to use a 1/2 inch spacer to make sure that my plywood top will fit in and sit right at the surface. Once you have it where you want, it's always a good idea to just clamp it right into place so it doesn't shift around on you. So next up, I got some locking casters for the bottom of this thing so I can move it around to wherever I need it. So since we're pretty close to the end, I'm just going to drill a couple of pilot holes. I only really had wood screws for this. There might have been a better way to do it, but I just threw some washers on and screwed them in. So once we've got all 4 casters on, we can take it and flip it over and roll it around and make sure that that's going to work for us. So now that we have our frame built, we can go ahead and start cutting out some plywood for the top and bottom. It's not always the easiest to get a nice straight cut with this track, but it works well enough. If you can spring the money for an actual track saw, I would definitely recommend doing that. Apparently I didn't hit the record button, so you'll just have to imagine this. Now we got our piece all cut out, we'll just slam it right into place. Perfect. I'm just going to use my brad nailer to hold this into place. It's not going to have a lot of pressure on it, anything, and if the tabletop gets all beat up, then this way I can just pry it out and put a different piece on. Then we're just going to go ahead and cut out a piece for the bottom as well. So with the top of the table, the plywood's actually sitting right on top of the legs, but this has to go around the leg. So I'm just going to use a couple of 2x4s and draw out where I got to cut with my jigsaw. Originally I was going to have this piece sit right on top of my stretchers, but then I realized I cut it a little too short, so the best thing was going to be to put it inside, just like the top of the table. So I threw a couple extra 2x4s in here just for a little support. Now, this fits perfectly this time, but I won't lie, I had to do a little bit of shaving down on the edges. So now that we have the actual table built, now is the time we can go ahead and just start customizing it for whatever you want. In my case, I actually had a set of drawers that I built for a different video that I didn't end up posting. And so they were just laying around, so I thought I might as well just throw them in the workbench. But I needed some walls to attach the drawer slides to, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut down what's left of my plywood and put some walls up. Now I should also mention I built this workbench to be the exact height of my table saw so I could use it as an outfeed table, which I should have done here, but clearly I wasn't thinking. Once I had my 2 walls cut out, then I could go ahead and just screw one of these to the table legs, and then I'm just going to use pocket holes to secure the other one. The 2x4 underneath the table didn't quite line up to where I wanted it, so I just added this 2x2 piece in for a little bit of support and something I could screw the wall to. Okay, now I'm going to put my drawer slides in. They may be intimidating to some people, but they're actually pretty simple. Just as long as you have the right spacing in between and both your drawer slides are nice and level. In my case, I just went ahead and used the spacer for the bottom ones. Now for the next ones, I just went ahead and leveled my workbench as best I could, and then I just used a laser and put it right where I wanted the next drawer slides. I found that this has worked pretty well for me in the past, and it definitely worked for me here. So So after I got the drawer slides in, I tried my drawers out, and I found out that my plywood wall was a little bit bowed. So I took a little bit of leftover OSB I had from a different project, and I just cut it out into the dimensions of the opening I had left, put some pocket holes in it, and then I just put that into place. That sucked my wall back into being straight, and it worked out beautifully. Putting this back wall into place also prevents my drawers from shooting out the backside, which I didn't want either. There, now this worked out much better. Originally the middle one, the rails weren't even touching, so this worked out really good. As you can see here, I have room for another drawer, but I only pre-built 3 of them. And I wanted the bottom drawer to be nice and deep. So what I did was I cut out some pieces of wood in the same dimension that the drawers already were, and then I just placed that on top so it could have a deeper drawer. This wood I use is not really the best for these kinds of drawers because it gets really bowed in the middle, so it's hard to have a really nice joint at the end, but it'll do the trick. So then I just took a bead of glue, put it all the way around my drawer, and put my new extension right on top of it. Then I put some pocket holes in so I could just drill it straight in. This isn't the prettiest thing, but it's only going to be in my shop, and I'm not too worried about it, and it worked out pretty well. So every drawer needs some drawer fronts, and this one was going to be pretty big. So I had this piece of wood left over from my crescent moon shelf build, which people seem to like quite a bit. So if you haven't seen that, go check it out. So this was the only piece of wood I had that was really going to be big enough. So I just cut out the shape that I needed and the dimensions I needed and used my circular saw to cut it out. So I wanted to keep this build as cheap as I could, but I didn't have any cabinet hardware laying around, so I just cut out a little piece just so I could get my hand in there and pull it out. This maybe isn't the best option since now a lot of sawdust is going to get in there, but sawdust gets everywhere in the shop anyway, so I'm not too worried about it. After I had this all cut out, I just took my round over bit and rounded over all the edges, which the shots were very out of focus, so I didn't show them. So after I had it rounded over, then I just sanded it all down. Now, it looks like it's going to be a pretty good fit. So I've seen a lot of great builders on YouTube use this trick using playing cards. So you just take an even amount of playing cards and lay them down just to keep the drawer front from dragging on the bottom of the workbench. As you can see, I'm just using my brad nailer to tack this on while the glue is still drying. But that probably isn't going to be enough, so I'm just going to go ahead and countersink some 1¼ inch screws in the back to keep the drawer fronts on. Then I just used the exact same process and made the other 2 drawer fronts. So that's the left end of my workbench taken care of. So I'm just going to throw a little bit of pegboard on the right end of it. That way I can have all my sandpaper and all kinds of stuff just hanging on the edge with some pegs. So in behind where I have my drawers, I had a little bit of space opened up. So I figured I'd put a little power tool rack back there. I just put some pieces of wood on an angle just so I could have my power tools at the ready. Nothing fancy about it. I just took whatever tools I figured I could fit back there and just kind of place the wood where I thought was going to work. I don't need this workbench to be the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. I just want it to be as functional for my space as it can be. which is part of the joy of woodworking, is making something that you need that's going to work for your space. I had all this space up top doing nothing, so I figured I'd just put another little shelf in there. I just used a piece of wood as a spacer, put some pocket holes in, some OSB, and just screwed it into place. I decided I was going to keep my chargers and all my batteries in here, so I didn't want them to fall out, and I didn't really want to see too much of the OSB, so I just took a little strip of 3/4 inch wood and put a little lip on it so my tools didn't fall out. So then on my end that's opposite of the pegboard, I had a little bit of space too. So I figured I'd just make some little shelves that I could throw some stain or glue or whatever I wanted on. I just started by ripping this 1x6 wood in half and then cut out my pieces for the shelf on the chop saw. I also used a little bit of leftover plywood just for the bottom of one of these little shelves. Then I just put pocket holes in everything and put it all together. So now once I had all my basic pieces of my workbench put together, I could go ahead and start sanding the whole thing. Now I didn't go too crazy on it, I just smoothed it out a little bit and then I went ahead and put on a couple coats of polyurethane. Now this stuff can be kind of tricky to put on, you just want to use nice long strokes for it and do nice light coats. Once the first coat is dry, you can go ahead and do a really light sanding in between with some 220 grit and then just hit it with another coat. Just keep doing that until you're happy. So once I had the first coat of poly on, then I could go ahead and just start putting my pegboard together. I just gathered up what I thought I wanted to have on the end, and I just kind of started putting everything on until I got a layout that I liked. The set of pegs I bought came with these great little plastic pieces that basically just strap your hooks into place, so that way if you pull out instead of up, it's not going to pull the whole peg out. Then I could just start finding homes for all the rest of my tools. This is what it looks like when it's done now, but I'm sure I'm going to have lots of little ideas of things to add to it in the future, which is part of the fun.
So that's it for this one, Wild Ones. Pretty basic, really simple way to get a nice workbench. I don't have a ton of tools, so this fits pretty much everything I need. I think it turned out pretty good. It'll be super functional. If you're gonna build one and you got a table saw, just build it the same height as your table saw. That way you get a nice outfeed table. There's a lot of other great workbench videos out there, but this is how I did mine. So if you guys liked what you saw, you wanna see more, you wanna keep up to date with what's going on with me, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, definitely subscribe. That would be so huge for me. I would appreciate it so much. And I hope to see you on the next video on Wild Rose DIY.